Okay, I'm going to play this game, Fortress Europa. Fortress Europa. The last time I played it, I had two versions. One where I had an invasion that failed, and one invasion that passed. I did get through. And my conclusion in talking to some of the Fortress Europa aficionados, those are people that actually know the game and have played it quite frequently, is that if you manage to have a successful invasion, then more or less you will win by invading Germany. I'm not sure that's exactly true, because it does say in the game that they were careful to play balance it, and so that they have some optional rules in the back that would be used to unbalance it in different ways if you thought it was needed, but they thought that it was still possible to lose even if you did have a successful invasion. But I've decided that I'm going to take bad advice and invade from the south of France. It was actually talked about to do that, I wonder, but maybe not in place of a northern Normandy invasion. But later they did invade in the south, in Operation Dragoon, I believe it was called. But this time I'm doing the first invasion from the south, and then perhaps another invasion from on another beach in the month of August to see if it'll actually work. So we'll give it a shot. We'll try an invasion from the south. I'll play through the game and we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm laying out the pieces. I'm laying out the charts, getting ready to play the scenario, and we'll move into it soon. Here's the southern invasion. So we're doing a southern invasion. This is the first turn. The northern part of the map is unmolested. On the southern half, we have a commando rangers coming in. These are successful paratroop drops, invading with French and Americans in the south. So we'll see what comes of it. Okay, here's the situation after the first impulse. There was a German unit that was eliminated there, and the invasion seems to be successful. These paratroop raids only caused the headquarters units to retreat. This one had to retreat after it rolled a 1-to-1 odds. So, okay, here's the situation after the second impulse of the Allied movement. Looks like they were repulsed here. They weren't able to take Marseille, but were able to move forward and drive this unit back. So they do have a beachhead with a mulberry. We'll see how this is the situation after the German second impulse. Looks like the invasion hasn't been repulsed yet, but the Germans were able to use rail movement to bring reinforcements in from their invasion force, strengthening Marseille with another unit. So there's another unit down there, and also bringing in 3 armored units to back it up. And there wasn't enough. The Germans managed to squeeze some rail traffic through, and maybe we should use more air factors to suppress that. So there's the situation. Looks like it's going to be a tough invasion in the south just to get it going. Okay, here's the situation before the 2nd June turn. So in my initial invasion, I allowed some armor to come in. I forgot that armor can't come in, so that kind of colored the thing a little bit. So replaced that unit with a infantry unit. So they can't invade with armor except for the British 79th. So here's the situation. Nothing's changed up here so much, but down here there's the invasion. So we'll take a look at it here in a minute. Okay, after the second impulse of the Allies, they were driven out of Marseille by this 1-to-1 attack here. And so they lost the supply capacity and had to reduce 5 units by 1 step. Okay, here's the situation after the Germans' second impulse turn. They didn't have a supply, a headquarters after all this combat within 5 units. In order they could hold Marseille, but they'd have to take a step loss. So my choice was to move back. instead of taking another step loss with a unit out of supply. So they get Rommel here. That's 1, 2, 3. It's as close as they can get to supply these units. Those are in supply from this side, but here's a supply unit here. He can supply, but they can't. So that's the end of the second. It looks like they had to leave Marseille for supply issues, rather than be cut off. The situation after the third turn in June, both turns. So the Germans had to abandon Marseille, and these units are out of supply, so they moved them back to Italy. So it looks like this front is able to capture these supply points. This one's damaged at half strength, but nonetheless, they're able to capture. Toulouse is also damaged at half strength. Toulouse. So they're able to start their front and pouring units in. These units up here are free to move, but Germans have been restricted in rail traffic. They managed to move down a unit here, just about a march down, driving across country. They got a unit into Toulouse. So this is actually Toulon, yes. That's Toulouse up there. So anyway, that's the end of the turn. The southern invasion has succeeded, but can they drive into Germany and win the game? It's a good question. Okay, here's the situation before the third June turn and our southern invasion. You see how we've kind of pushed the Germans up the Rhone Valley, and so now it's a battle at the Rhone Valley, and maybe trying to prevent the Germans to be other units to be called in and threatening another invasion in August. But we still have a couple turns before that's available. The situation in the south after the Allies' June 3rd turn, they actually destroyed units using air power. They had the superior air power and managed to convert odds high enough to drive these units deep into the mountainous territories, destroy some, and actually move up the Rhone Valley. Looks pretty tough for the Germans, and getting these units down will be hard because we do have railway attacks that will stop railway movement this turn. So I don't know, the southern invasion seems to be working. Second the third June turn, managed to get these guys out of the rough terrain, out of the mountains a little bit with a second impulse, and they have to stay within 5 hexes of the only headquarter unit they have available. This guy was able to close within 5, so he's okay. These units are in Italy, so they're all right. Up here, despite the fact there's no rail movement, they're trying to march down some armor down to defend this area. Just by running across country, they're staying on the rails in case they get rail movement available next turn. Other than that, there was not much movement or change. Trying to put a unit here to block this pass here a little bit. But the southern invasion shows promise. Before the June 4 turn, and the south that we just got through playing. You see the southern invasion moving through the Rhone Valley, and most of the other German units not being able to move down, but some of them marching down to intercept the passage up the Rhone Valley. The situation after the Allies' June 4th turn, moving up the Rhone Valley. They're able to bring in a few more units because Marseille has an 8 supply capacity now. Situation after the Germans' second impulse on the June 4th turn. So, looks like these units have been pushed back into the rough mountain areas. We have some other army units coming up, and that may be able to march down from the north apart from rail traffic, because rails are pretty much interdicted by railway attacks. So it still may prove something to stop the movement up the Rhone Valley. We'll see. Okay, here's the situation before the first July turn. I'm on July for this turn. The Germans will get some aircraft coming in, so they may be able to have the opportunity of breaking up the stranglehold on rail traffic, and that may mean they can brace up some defense here on this Rhone Valley. But they do have to be aware that coming up in August, after the July turns, there's 4 July turns, there will be an opportunity for another invasion on one of these other beaches. They still have to prevent, to win the game, they have to prevent the consequences of the Allies seizing these German cities. And so it's not an easy win for the Allies, even though they've been able to push up the Rhone Valley without too much trouble. Situation, it's after the July 1st, the first July turn, which was clear as you see. The Allies are continuing to push up the Rhone Valley, maintaining their supply capacity to bring in units. These German units were cut off, so they made a desperation attempt. They couldn't come back through the Alps here or through there. They could be supplied from this headquarters unit. The headquarters unit with Rommel right here was captured. But they elected just to fight and drive this unit back, but they all lost steps, and so this is all the remnants of those units. They're out of supply and no hope of getting in supply. They can't make it to Italy, cross the Alps, and they can't cross this terrain in time to be supplied. So they're out of the battle and out of the war. So up here we've done some minor adjustments, but they were able to move more units in because of German air power being available. It pushed down the railway attacks just to 1 sack, allowed 4 units to be moved by rail, and that brought in some extra units down here to solidify a little bit. There was a 1-to-1 attack tried here by the Germans, which failed. But basically the Allies are still pushing up the Rhone Valley, and they have the objective of taking all these many of these German cities. They have to take quite a few of them to win the game. So it's still, the game's not over until the second July turn. So we've pushed up the Rhone Valley. We'll see what happens. The Germans may have the ability to free up some more railway traffic and move things around, perhaps. This is the situation after the Allies finished their second July turn. They were able to push, drive German units back, but there was some setbacks on the second impulse. First impulse we were able to use ground support, second not, and so in that one we had lower odds and we had some retreats and loss of units driven back. So might have got too ambitious on our second impulse. So that's the turn, that's the Allied turn. The situation after the Germans were able to move, they knocked down some of the railway attacks, and so they were able to move 4 units by rail, strengthen their defense here. Their strength and defense is strengthening on the Rhone Valley. Meanwhile, weakening some of the areas up here, so they might want to do some readjustments for planning for an invasion soon, but that's still not another a couple turns before they really have to worry about that. So the Allies are running into a stiff resistance here, trying to fight their way up the Rhone Valley. But it's about to break out here somewhere, but still, it's a tough battle. Before the July 3rd, the third July turn, and here's how the situation is in the Rhone Valley. Nothing much changes up here, And let's see what happens, and they're moving forward. Okay, here's the situation after the Allies turned and decided to they formed with the defense manager to beat these spies back a little bit, but that hex right there was hard to hold because this would be tracking. They would have to attack across the river to hold on to it at lower odds, and that didn't work last time. So this time we used the better part of discretion and retreated one hex and gave up that space. Here's the situation after the Germans' July 3rd turn. Counterattacks didn't seem to be appropriate right now. They're just building up a defense here, but trying to find a place for counterattack. Wasn't just beating themselves against this group right here probably isn't effective. Maybe sometime trying to destroy the supply line might be a better thing as they try to move all the way into Germany, which reminds you of the Battle of the Bulge right in here somewhere. So, and these units did some minor readjustment, waiting for an invasion soon possible. Although they're all free to move, the ones that are the zero movement are coastal ones. To move them would cut back on the defense capabilities a lot. The French are building up here a little bit with one unit they had available, maybe to move it this way. But that's the end of the turn for the 3rd July turn. So the 4th July turn, here's where it looks like in the Rhone Valley, and static things up here. The Germans may get some more reinforcements in this turn. And so here we go. Let's see what happens on this turn. After the Allies' 4th July turn, they're able to push, instead of pushing up the Rhone Valley against this, we swerved a little bit further north and try to go around. Just trying to get remember the goals of Paris and Brussels, and these cities over here, plus another invasion coming in. So seemed like a good plan. It seemed to work pretty well. There was quite a few losses here, but the Germans suffered losses too, so that may work out. So let's see how the German turn goes. Okay, here's the July 4th turn. And it's over. I mean the 4th July turn, not the July 4th turn. And so Allied units have pushed up the Rhone Valley some more. The Germans are fortified but not counterattacking. They're getting thin in units, and so I can see how it's tough to defend, but there's still a mighty long way to winning the battle, for winning the war game for the Allies. So we'll see how this works, but the southern invasion still holds some promise, because you're able to push up this way and not be stopped, and now they've thinned out their defenses up here in order to try to beat these guys back. So maybe another invasion up here now is more possible and might be better supported. So we'll see. That's the end of the 4th July situation before the August 1st turn. So it's a whole new season. Perhaps an invasion is possible in the north, so could change the whole tenor of the game here, as we're stacking up in the Rhone Valley and not being able to advance too fast into Germany. So we'll see what happens next. Okay, here's the situation after the Allies' August invasion. We decided to invade in the 19th military district. No, actually the 1st. The 19th is down here where we invaded here first. The invasion looks like it was successful so far, but the Germans have their turn to play yet. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so here's the situation after the August turn. August 1st turn. So we had an invasion in the 1st military district. And looks like this is still advancing. Given all the turns that remain, maybe it's a wash. The Germans aren't going to be able to prevent this, but they do have quite a few replacements coming in, and reinforcements, and strong reinforcements coming in. So maybe it's tougher than we think. There's supposed to be a balanced game. right now it looks like a rout. So we're trying to pull everything off to throw in front of this invasion force here and move down as fast as we can without any rail capabilities. And so it's kind of the best we can do as far as Germans go. So these guys have advanced from there all the way to that point easily. So wants to stop the invasion, I don't know, or slow it down, or prevent the loss of Paris and Brussels, and for these back German towns with stars on. I'm not sure. Maybe their defense can start solidifying as it gets to this point, and the German defense can start solidifying. August turn. And so here we are. Invasion here, invasion there. Rhone Valley overview. And the time chart. After the 2nd August turn. Still advancing here, but limited by supply. I actually had to pull back. We had advanced to here, but had to pull back to keep within the supply lines. And punching the hole right here, but the Germans were able, because of a storm, to move maximum numbers by rail. So we're going to put up some defense here. This unit's moving up to help for supply. The British and the invasion in the 1st Military District are advancing, but again, they're limited by supply lines. They can only go so far. And the Germans are beginning to solidify defense. They had something of a counterattack here and drove a unit back with losses. So it's getting tougher. And they're pulling off units here because they don't anticipate another invasion. They might pull these off soon and get them to come south. So it's getting tighter, trying to get to the objective of Paris and Brussels right here, and 4 of these German cities way back here. We still have lots of turns left, but it's a tough battle to cross France now with supply lines and limited supply capacity. There was a storm that cut the Mulberry in half here. It was a 12 and now it's a 6. So that cut back on the number of units that could be moved into France. Here's the situation before the 3rd August turn. Before we play, there's the drive up from north of Switzerland, heading for Germany, and the British, pretty much British invasion in the 1st Military District. And there are some reinforcements coming in this turn, so we'll see what happens. After the Allies' turn, looks like we are advancing on Paris, and these guys are the British are driving this way, so things are progressing well for the Allies. They have to take Paris and Brussels and 4 of these cities back here still, so I'm not sure, but it's supposed to be a balanced game, so the Germans should have ways to kind of prevent that. We'll see. This is the August 3rd, after the German turn. They're pulling off all their coastal defenses, and they're strung out, and they're not too strong here and there, but they're able to use some rail factors to bring in some people into Paris and strengthen this defense. So even though Paris is exposed, the defense has solidified somewhat, and these 2 invasions may join, even though there's some strung out German units here. So Paris, we have to take Paris and Brussels, and these places here to win the game. The German defense is getting stronger as we approach those areas. Okay, here's the situation after the the 4th August turn. The Canadians have come in, and maybe we'll be cleaning up some of these areas up here. Good, you can get more supply and knock out that submarine base. The Germans are retreating and solidifying a defense to prevent loss of Brussels. Paris is, I don't know if they can save Paris, but maybe they can save some of these other cities in this part of Germany. We'll see. So that's the end of the 4th of July turn. September turn that we've already moved the Allies. There's lots of attacks this turn. The Canadians are trying to catch up over here and trying to get some more supply capacity by capturing this part, this part of France. British are pushing this way, not attacking Paris yet, but trying to get close. There's Paris right there. This is a thinly held front here while we're trying to maybe nibble off some on this end of it too. So that's beginning to feel thin in our advance. The situation after the September turn, it looks like Paris is in the reach of the Allies, but they didn't quite seize it. And the Germans are falling back. They've given up on this peninsula there. Might be doing a little bit of movement here, putting a headquarters here to threaten some supply units in the south that are poorly defended, but trying to solidify a defense as they're retreating from fallen areas. That's what's happening now. So we'll see. The Allies still have to take Brussels, which is right over here. Where's Brussels? Brussels and these cities to the south, to the far on the east side of Germany. So still a haul, but things are moving well for the Allies. Because I lost so quickly, is that there's most of the game is played well after the invasion. I'm only gone, looks like there's still maybe halfway as far as turns go. So there's a lot of warfare going on to try to work your way across France to seize Germany in this game. So a lot of the game is not focusing on the D-Day invasion, or in this case the southern invasion that was done down here on the 19th Military District. You have to find a way as the Germans to impede and hold off for quite a while so that you're going to win the game. The situation after the 2nd September turn, looks like the Germans had some reinforcements come in that are moving to the front line. They're solidifying a line here, I guess east of Metz. Looks like we're shaping up to have a stronger defense in this area with the Battle of the Bulge area. There's Brussels has not yet fallen. I'm not sure how to prevent it. They have scattered defenses here, trying to retreat out of North France, being pursued by British and American troops and armored units coming up from Paris. Paris was relieved by, and traditionally, just like in World War II, we used French units to march into Paris, and the Canadian units have mopped up here in this Brest Peninsula. But the Germans were allowed to take, we neglected down here, and they were able to take Nice and Caen, taking out 3 supply capacity, so they're causing a nuisance down here in South France, trying to cause a little bit of disruption and trying to solidify a line here. No counterattack seemed appropriate yet, but anyway, so there you go. That's the 2nd turn and 2nd September turn. Okay, I'm videoing. This is the September 3rd turn. It hasn't been played yet. Just moved the Allies already. are able to get some more supply capacity because they seized this area up in North France. Even though Germany is threatening down here a little bit, they took away some of the supply areas here in Caen and Nice. So, but holding a kind of a thin front on this line and pushing up past Paris towards Brussels. That seems to be the plan. We're actually bombing these bridges and seizing this area, so these units may end up being isolated. 3rd September turn. I mean, the Germans and the Allies completed the full turn. Still trying to learn what the German strategy is. Down here in the south, just these two units effectively stalemated this. There's no way they can attack. It's just 1 to 2 odds in either one of those positions. So they might be able to hold these cities if the Allies don't push them back. But with the capture of this peninsula and these peninsular cities up here, the supply capacity is getting quite large for the Allies. So they're becoming able to bring in most of their units. So now they captured Brussels in this turn. And so Brussels and Paris are captured. They still have to capture all these 4 German cities here. So Germany, I'm having them scramble to fortify, to man all these fortifications right here along this line here. I guess it's the Siegfried Line, if I remember right. So we have to try to strengthen these right here. But the Germans weren't prepared. Some of these units are still down south, and they're scrambling up north and scrambling this way to try to get there. No counterattack seemed appropriate this turn, or I couldn't find a use for them. These units are trying to run up the coast to try to prevent being cut off, and they still exist, but don't know if they can make it. So there's the situation after the 3rd September turn. This is the end of the September 4th turn. So the Allies continue to push through this front. They've seized Brussels and Paris, and they're pushing onto this line right here. There's cities they have to get way back in this part of Germany. So it's quite a haul, but it feels like a chess endgame where there's not much the Germans can do to win, I wonder. But you see a solid line of defense here beginning to solidify across with a lot of fortresses on this line. I guess this is the Siegfried Line. So maybe there's a way to hold this, but Allied air power is pretty much able to counter it. In the next turn, the Germans are going to get October. They only get 4 counter air, so it's hard for them to counter the effects of the Allied air power. All this part of France is pretty well mopped up, giving the Allies maximum supply capacity. The German units in south of France that were threatening are bottled up there. So I still find it hard to believe the Germans can win this game, but there is quite a bit of land to be taken yet. So we'll see. The Germans are being driven back, but still holding with thin layer of units. They did try to counterattack. Unsuccessful counterattack at this point. They're all driven back, but still managed to set up a front here. And that's the situation after the first October turn. The second turn in October. Americans are still driving. Looks like a couple of the cities, Bremen and Hanover, are open to capture, but the Germans have brought in some more units that they managed to replace or get reinforced, and they're strengthening this line again. Fell back here and try to counterattack right here. And at 1 to 1 odds, they surrounded these units and tried to counterattack, but were driven off. So with losses. So that's the end of this turn. Okay, this is the 4th October turn. No, 3rd October turn finished. 3rd October turn. And the Germans are getting hemmed into Germany. I think my error in playing this game was that I let the Germans lose too many high value units early in the game in this part of France. They should have retreated them back, anticipating defending Germany, and then maybe they could have used them for counterattacks like the Battle of the Bulge type things. But right now they have little or nothing, even with replacements. Trying to replace them, they just can't get much. There's an 8-7 there. They managed to bring in a 9-7, so they have some stronger army units here, but they're just being overwhelmed as they're being pushed back into Germany. So they've already, so Brussels has fallen, Paris has fallen. So Brussels and Paris, and now Bremen and Hanover. And the other towns that need to fall are Nuremberg, München. But not even all of those have to fall, I don't think. I'll look at the rules. I think 4 of them have to fall. So it's really pretty much the end game here. And I'm not sure how the Germans could win. So this game, I think, next time you play, you have to try to squirrel away more units if you're the Germans and not allow them to be eaten up or cut off in the Allied advance. And this was a game where the Allied advance came from the south and moved up this valley. And then we had a secondary invasion here and moved over. When this invasion came in, all these units were cut off. And so not a lot of them got, not as many got through as they ought to. So I played the Germans. Obviously I played them badly. And so there's bound to be a better, there's a better way. And I think that's probably the better plan, is just to try to move units out of France faster and not allow them to get lost, and have more of a reserve here in Germany to stand up and defend and counterattack. The 4th October turn. And so the Germans are continuing to be driven back. Significant advances here. They only need to capture 2 more of the major cities. This is one, Nuremberg, and one of these, and München. I think one of these others is a major city. Oh, Nuremberg and Frankfurt. Any one of those and the game is over. So it looks like it's going to be over in another turn or 2. They can also capture 15 German cities, and that'll be the end of the game. Again, I don't think the Germans could win this, but I think what I should have done is try to hold on to some more units as they exited France and keep some of those high-level armored units for counterattacks. So that would have been a good plan. Germans look like they've lost the game, but we'll see. November, the 1st November turn, Germans are hanging on by their fingernails, but the U.S. has seized this kind of area. They take, they've got 2 of these 4 cities, and there's 2 more right there. Well, 1 more to see. This one, Nuremberg, yes, and oh, okay. I have to get 4 of the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they have 2. They get these 2. The game's over, and it looks pretty close to that. The Germans had some units pulled off into the Panzer reserve box that were over here hoping to defend, and they got pulled off to the eastern front. So that's the situation at the end of this turn. The Germans are still holding on. There's the 2 cities that need to go. It's this one, which is Mannheim, and Nuremberg. Those 2 go, the game is over. I see if you had a lot more German units and maybe some strong ones, you could make it really tough for the Allies to try to win this part of the game. But it's pretty much over for the Germans now. But they're still holding on. It takes more and more turns to try to do this. So they're still holding on 1 more turn at least. This is the The 3rd November turn, it's over. Notice it was clear. So air power is used. The Germans still haven't lost the game, but they're so close. Everything's in disarray. They used the British paratrooped in and caught this city off guard. Mansion. So it's only one more city will end the game. And Frankfurt was, the units were destroyed out of Frankfurt, but there's still, British units were not able to move in during the turn. Nuremberg is still defended, and defended heavily, actually. Now they were able to put forward another armored unit with their last replacements. But it's still, so they still haven't lost the game even at this time. So it makes me think that if they had really quite a few units left, they might have been able to hold out. Of course, there's quite a few turns left. We're only in this turn. There's a whole column of turns left. So I'm still not sure the Germans could win it. But maybe if you pull back enough defense, because it gets really tight in this part of the game board, trying to pull the Allies through. This part of the game board is almost impossible to defend. So I should have not worked at defending that, but should have pulled back as fast as possible and kind of retreated and delayed till the Germans could come here and make a solid defense with as many units as possible. And that might have made a difference in the game. But it looks like one more turn and it's over. Keeping with the rules, as soon as victory conditions are over, the game is over. No chance for the Germans to recapture. So we just captured Frankfurt, major city, and Nuremberg, and München. So all the major cities in Germany were captured. So every one of them. But this turn we captured the necessary number. We didn't have it last turn. So this ends the game on turn November, the 4th November turn. So there's quite a few turns left that the Germans would have to survive till March 1st to win this game. But again, if they were able to take a lot of these units that they lost, quite a few, and trying to bring them back into this fortified line along here, and this part of a difficult thing with forest and mountains and fortresses and things like that, you might have made a pretty strong defense if we fell back and fortified this before the Germans started losing units. And that might be the strategy to win. So, or at least to make the game playable. But the way I played it, I fought too hard trying to hold back on the southern invasion here, trying to beat these guys back and keep holding them off, and up here, but you just couldn't do it because the Allied air power kept stacking the odds against whatever you had put up, and you would get driven back with losses. And the few counterattacks I tried were small and unsuccessful and late in the game. So it appears that the best way to do this might be a more judicious retreat from this part of France to that part of Germany right here to defend. And no doubt that's probably more what happened with the German actual warfare. But anyway, the game is over. We played the whole game. This is it. And victory conditions are met. Germans lose.